All right. Mm.
Good
Hey, Pike,
afternoon.
how's it going?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing well. How's the weather over there?
It was a beautiful morning. It's getting hot now.
Okay.
Where are you? Florida
I'm
right now?
yeah, I'm in Florida. Yeah, it's been very stormy
Yes.
this week because
Yeah, we had tornado warnings on Sunday,
oh yeah.
but I don't think any actually touched down.
Yeah, I saw Boston was having a lot of tornado warnings too. Um, Hello, Andy, and hello, James. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Shira.
Hey, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, let me know if you need anything at all. For everyone else on the call, James is joining us today. They're going to help us with some of the notes as Dominic's out today. And hi, Mia.
Hey, how's it going?
Going well. How are you?
Good.
And Ashira, I've actually not done notes like this before. I'm guessing I just use this notes tab on the side. Like
No.
it's at the bottom. Is that
So
right?
so I will actually share a document. And then we'll all go into the same document, and then I will share the screen so everyone will be able to see.
Gotcha.
Okay. And thank you again so much for helping with this.
No problem.
Matt, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Mia?
Good. We'll give it a few minutes. It seems like we're still waiting for a quorum. And also, actually, it's not 12:30 yet. So we're eager to start. Hey, Jen.
Hi, Mia.
So Ashira, it looks like I don't think we're going to have I didn't get an answer specifically from Dominic, but it doesn't look like we're going to have anyone from the PUC on. Since it's on the agenda, we can just touch base if there's anything that like any members noticed was on the docket or anything. I think there's a few filings, but I haven't been following it super closely this week. So we'll just keep that on the agenda as we discussed, which should be quick. Okay, let me count. Let's
Hello.
Hello. Okay, I think we're pretty close to a quorum. I think we might have reached it. Let's see. So I think I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting. Oh, hi, Srini. Good. Okay, so it's a decent cross section. So I'm going to call this meeting to an order. I will briefly review the agenda as always. Just a reminder, as always, really helpful to have everyone who is on the EAG be on camera if at all possible, muted when not speaking. Everyone else should stay off camera and muted unless we're in a public comment session. And as always, the chat is for purely administrative EAG use and shouldn't be used for side conversation. So thanks, everybody. So we'll run through the agenda. We're going to approve the last meeting minutes. We have a section for updates from the PUC. Dominic is away this week and we don't have another representative from the PUC. We can discuss briefly if anyone has any news that they've gotten from the PUC, but that should be quick. Our regular report from the TAG. Chris will report on his meeting with the TAG to discuss the equity rubric. Then Ashira is going to touch base on sort of our work plan going forward that she's helped draft for us and she included in the packet. And then we're going to discuss two separate report outlines. First, the question about LIHEAP and what we'd like to get from that discussion if we're able to bring someone in to discuss LIHEAP issues, public comment on that. Then we'll jump into the section of the report about households not able to access clean heat measures, and we'll do the same thing we did last time, which is sort of go over it, what's in the outline so far and what more individual EAG members want to add, public comment on that, and then we'll close as usual. And one thing that's not on the agenda is we were not able to have a credit issues subgroup meeting. Ashira sent around a calendar invite, but we just couldn't find a time before this meeting that worked for the most people. So Ashira is going to send that around again after this meeting, and we'll try again for later this week or early next week. And so hopefully we can have a meeting before next time, which seems doable. So to be determined on the credit issues group. Okay. Great. So next I'm going to go into approving the June 11th meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at those? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. So I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to approve the June 11th, 2024 meeting minutes. And if everyone could just raise their hands, that would be great. Okay. I think I'm seeing, oh, and I'm so sorry, Haley, sorry to interrupt. Haley is sitting in for Emily representing Efficiency Vermont. She totally reminded me, and so she'll be participating instead of Emily today. Sorry about that, Haley, I appreciate you joining us. So thank you for voting as well. So I am seeing unanimous consent, so we'll consider the June 11th meeting minutes approved. Thanks, everybody. Okay, and so the next update is the PUC, which I mentioned. I don't think there's anything there, but does anyone have any PUC business that they'd like to flag for the benefit of the group? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so we'll wait for next week. I think Dominic said that he didn't expect anything to have come up, so we'll wait for next week, or sorry, next meeting. So onward from that, let's turn it over to Matt for updates from the TAG, and Haley, feel free to jump in if there's anything you wanted to add with that.
Yeah, so we had a meeting on the 13th, and then there was also a special meeting on pacing, which concluded with a series of filings that occurred over the past week. And to get everyone up to speed, pacing is how do I define it? Pacing is how we define, how we adjust the declining emission schedules in order to meet the mandates of the Global Warming Solutions Act, that 40% number by the end of the decade. How do you establish that schedule of getting to that point? How do you describe the declining carbon intensity values of the fossil fuels used for space heating and water heating? How do you figure out what data sets to use, or the different data sets, how they talk to one another, and how you adjust the annual requirements to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by the obligated parties, which are those fuel dealers that bring the fuel in or into Vermont for ultimate consumption for heat or hot water. And then a brief conversation about some of the questions that we've asked, which is how do you ensure that low and moderate income Vermonters receive benefits of clean heat measures and aren't just paying for them. There's so much to dig into there, and it's not concluded. I'd be interesting to see what the reaction is from the PUC to all the different filings. Just speaking from my filing, which a 4-page filing that happened on last Wednesday, which was both the emission schedule and the declining cap of carbon intensity values we addressed, but also recognizing what might be a fatal flaw in this policy that frankly was addressed the first year in 2022 when it didn't become law because of a veto sustained, and then was addressed again, but wasn't changed when it did become law, which is the looking at the annual requirements for obligated parties. To say it succinctly, it was based on a utility model, and the concern I think expressed by many is that it doesn't work for the unregulated fuel dealers, because unlike utilities that have pipelines and poles and really expensive infrastructure, fuel dealers come and go, and they do now, and they will certainly later. And having a obligation that is attached to a prior year sales, not heating season, but calendar year, on data that's collected in the summer, may not be the best way to run this program, but that would require a statutory change. So, and I'll conclude here, there was a small group of TAG members that believe, as I do, that this program will fail without a statutory change to deal with that emissions reduction obligated party annual requirements. So a small subgroup is thinking about meeting and what we would do in order to change the law, because as it is right now, it is unworkable. It will create chaos in the heating market, and many people will suffer. So that's what we're trying to change.
Haley, I'm not sure you've been sitting in on any of the TAG discussions for Emily, have you?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the pacing subgroup of the TAG. And so just to piggyback on Matt, just wanted to add that, like as Matt said, that kind of subgroup has been reviewing the commission's proposal on pacing, and did initial comment, got TAG's feedback in the last meeting, and last week meant to further refine the comments to reflect the discussion at that TAG meeting. So we do anticipate this Thursday's TAG meeting, there'll probably be a vote to on whether to adopt those comments as TAG's comments on the commission's proposal. So that's my update from that side. Thanks.
Thanks, Haley. Does anybody have any questions for Matt? Okay, anything else from on this discussion before we move on? Okay, Next, I'll turn this over to Chris to talk about his own meeting with the tag. Thanks, Chris.
This will be brief. I had a great conversation with the technical advisory group. They received the equity rubric that our committee approved. Their questions were inquisitive and generally supportive. It was more, I think we got hung up more on just, hey, how do we use this tool? Just just more of a process. And I tried to communicate the message that I really think that Jen, Ben, and I learned when we kind of went through the questionnaire of, you really just got to just go through the questions, and it prompts that conversation, and that dialogue is really what we're looking for, so that folks are making informed decisions. Try not to get hung up on process, and just kind of go through the process. I think that there was a robust discussion around the room of just how they thought of equity as it applies to some of the work that they were doing. And it was clear, like, some of the work is more technical in nature, and maybe it's not applicable to use the rubric. There was other topics that it would be applicable. So there wasn't a commitment or a path forward on what they were going to do with it. They were going to reflect upon that, and but I walked away with a good supportive feeling from the technical advisory group. That is my update.
Jen?
Yeah, thank you for doing that, Chris. I did happen to watch the tag meeting, the recorded meeting, and I thought you did an excellent job. You really fielded people's questions. One comment intrigued me. Somebody had mentioned that we had not had a temporal category, and that might bear a little bit more exploring within the equity group. I think not looking at the maybe individual measures of the group, but that temporal idea, like once the act comes into fruition, where are the savings for reducing fossil fuels on a temporal going forward? If somebody replaces their fossil fuel with a heat pump or something, where's that calculation of their savings there? So I'm not sure if that person was getting at that, but I think that could be explored a little bit. But thanks for doing that. I thought it was great.
Oh, thank you.
And Jen, do you mind elaborating? Is that within the framework itself, or more something to think about for the report?
Maybe both. It kind of got me thinking that I think temporal can be either generational, like what we're doing now. How does that affect future generations? Got me thinking about the idea of, we've heard from other people about the urgency of reducing fossil fuel. That's temporal. And then just the idea of, I think we look a lot about what the funding to start this program might be, but I don't think we've costed that out economically. Like when you buy an energy efficient washer, it says you'll pay this much up front, but this is what you'll save over 10 years. So I think that's an equity issue with this program. And it just got me thinking about maybe that could be something we should add to the report or to the rubric.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a fair question to ask, Chris. You mentioned that there were different views of what equity means in the tag group. I was just curious what you meant by that, or.
Well, it was kind of a topic that came up when Jen, Ben, and I were going through the questions of just different. You come at a question from a different perspective, and you think everyone's on the same page, and all of a sudden, when folks are responding, it was different. So there was I walked away with the impression that there was just a lot of different backgrounds and subject matter experts in different areas that may come at it from a different perspective. It wasn't meant in a derogatory nature. It's just
no, I was just curious. And yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Pike?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is the new tag member, was she at the recent meeting? Has she been seated yet?
So we just got that announcement last week. So that was after the so the question and simple answer is no.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Chris about the tag meeting or for Matt? Okay, great. Happy to go ahead and move us on, Mia.
Sure, yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So the next thing that we'll be doing is talking about the work plan and operating procedure. So as you all know, we've been trying to make that transition from having, general discussions and really like figuring out our working structure and all of those things into really diving deep into, okay, how are we going to put together this report? And it's, that back and forth between, on one hand, we have to have alignment as a EAG. We have to have some kind of alignment and have these discussions to be able to just figure out what all is on the table. But we also have to start moving into the mindset of creating some type of report that has actual recommendations and substantive has data that supports what we were talking about and different ways to back up our claims. So one of the things that we went ahead and did was create a draft working plan, and I'll share my screen so that you can see that. And so this is a very rough working plan of what the next few meetings might look like, just so that we have a little bit of a better way to expect what we will be talking about at each meeting and going forward. So let me also share this with you as well and make sure. Okay. We'll put it into the chat. There we go. So the way that I broke this up was kind of thinking about it in two phases for each of one, starting with the and let me just make it, starting with the demographic worksheet and the different sections that we had already laid out, breaking up between one meeting, we'll have some time to start formulating our questions and thinking through, kind of doing some of the thinking that we did like at the last meeting. That was kind of that brainstorming, that aligning, that just talking out through the intricacies of the questions. So we do that in one meeting, and then in that same meeting, we identify, okay, what kind of questions might we need to ask to like maybe we need to bring in an expert to ask specific questions. Maybe we need to go back and look up some additional research about a certain thing, or maybe we just need a little bit more time to digest this. And then the next meeting, we'll spend some time going back. Either we'll have an expert that can come in and talk to us a little bit more about a specific thing. We might have had time to do a little bit more research. We might have had time to get our thoughts together a little bit better. And so the next half, or the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next meeting, we'll have that time to kind of make a more cohesive argument. So for example, today we will be talking about LIHEAP. So we'll have some time today to really start thinking through, okay, what are some questions that we might want to ask? What do we already know? What do we not know? And then next meeting is when we will invite the LIHEAP expert to come in and kind of answer some of those questions, walk through it with us, figure out where what gaps we still need to fill in. And so we've kind of blocked that out for every week. So like the next meeting, we'll start talking about Vermonters of color, minorities, and Indigenous groups. And then the meeting after that, if there's, I know like Jen, you've said that you have experts at CBEO that can help talk a little bit more about that. So that might be a good time to invite somebody in, even if they just want to come as a member of the public, to be able to give a little bit more background. And so I've kind of broken it up based on the demographics that we've had. But then as we get further in, we have some conversations just about, like we'll have a conversation about the tension between the objectives of the law to lower emissions overall and adding to low-income households to make this transition. So we'll have some of those bigger conversations. We just want to make sure that we have the things that we want to be able to report on already there, and we have kind of like everything out on the table, so we can have a fuller discussion about some of the bigger overarching themes. We also will have some overall discussions about recommendations for implementing the Clean Heat Standard, and then we'll continue to talk about more overarching themes. Then we'll move into the finalization phase. We're still working out the mechanism of exactly how we will do the finalization of the report. So if you have ideas about that, that's great. We've thought there may be like another subgroup that can be the one who really takes charge of finalizing it. Maybe we do it, each person who has a specific section will finalize that section and then come back. Like I said in some of the other meetings, this is your process. So if you have suggestions, very happy to hear those suggestions. So yes, Matt, I see your hand. I was going to open for any questions about the outline. Also, if we want to rearrange things, feel free. This is just how I drafted it, but very much a draft. So if you want to switch things around, we can. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, it's just, it's Richard Giddings confirmed, or is there someone else that is speaking from LIHEAP?
I asked him to attend, but I didn't ask him that long ago, so I'm still waiting on an answer. I'll try for next week, or next time. If we can't do that, we'll find a future time, or if he suggests someone else. So hopefully next time.
Yeah, no, he's perfect. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll see his availability, and we'll try to find a time to fit him in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Srini? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Ashira. I think it's a pretty good plan so that we can focus, allocate dedicated time on different focus areas. So have we identified, I think similar to Matt's question, have we identified like subject matter experts for each of these categories? Or is that something that, we need to figure out going forward?
No, we haven't. And the hope is that now that we have a little bit of a rough calendar, if you know of people who would be, good for a specific topic, you can like either write to me or Mia or Chris and let us know, and we can invite them officially, or you can also bring them in as just members of the public. And when we have that public comment period, they can weigh in as well.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And we discussed before, me and I were talking about this. It's not necessary that we have an expert for every single group. You are brought on because you are all experts as well. But this is just, it allows us to have a little bit more planning so that if we do get to an area and we realize, hey, there's actually a gap in knowledge here, and it would be useful to bring somebody in to speak about a specific thing, we have enough time to plan ahead to be able to do that, instead of, so far we've been doing everything a little bit ad hoc. So this gives us a little bit more structure as we go forward. And with that, I also have a few more questions that are a little bit more guiding questions as we continue to fill out the worksheet like we did last week. So I will also drop those into the chat. Okay. So as we are having these discussions, so far they've been, very free flowing discussions and free form discussions. But we want to really start focusing on, what would be right in the report? What kind of recommendations would we give? So I want us to think about impact, like really starting to recommend, here's what we should do. This is what we should, the PUC should consider. Is whatever we're talking about, is that actually a challenge, or are we just talking about the subject in general, or is there a specific challenge that we're identifying within each of these subjects? And if there is a challenge that we're identifying, what recommendation would we give? Again, focusing on recommendations, but really emphasizing, is this within someone's control to change? Is it within the PUC's control? Is it within somebody outside of the PUC's control? And what should they do about it? And then for implementation, really just what should the PUC do? And when it's being implemented, is it being implemented equitably? Any thoughts on that? Anything that we should add? Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, I think there should be a category that comes before impact, which is gaps, which is why are we at this place? Why do we feel, why hasn't the transition to clean energy been moving along at a faster pace? And for each of these groups, what have been the barriers in the current programs, which I think is why we're seeking a new way. So I would think that's an important first step for each of these demographics.
Awesome. Thank you. Matt.
I think you're framing it correctly, Ashira. I think one of the things that the technical advisory group did, and from the perspective of operating this program, but I think would have merit if the EAG decided to do it, is to recognize that there are things that perhaps the PUC can't do and can only be done through an act of the legislature. So the technical advisory group is moving in the direction toward explaining to the legislature on January 15th that the program that they designed that was given to the PUC is unworkable and is in fact dangerous to Vermonters who need this essential commodity, and that structural changes have to occur in order for it to be number one, usable, number two, effective in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I think the Equity Advisory Group could come up with the same set of, or a different set of recommendations about changing the statute to ensure equity. Furthermore, there may be a disagreement on the Equity Advisory Group, and that's fine. There certainly is on the Technical Advisory Group. I think we should at least recognize that there either should be one report that expresses those different opinions, or a vote of the Equity Advisory Group and a minority report expressing a different point of view. So two reports. That's something to consider.
Thanks, Matt. And that is one of the things that we are trying to bake into this, which is kind of further. So we are talking about it overall on September 17th. But what I hear you saying is that we need to think about it as we go through each of the sections. One of the things that I would, so the thought behind this is, if the PUC were to implement this anyways, we want to make sure that we do have at least some recommendation, some feedback. And we also, when we have this conversation, we want to make sure that we have kind of everything laid out first, so that we have an even more concrete argument at the end. So yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a need to kind of incorporate that conversation throughout. And then I just also want to point out that we do have time baked in. So it's actually, yes, starting September 3rd. to like do a deep dive into that. Do you think what do you think about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I like the way that you've framed that.
Okay, great. Mia?
Yeah, I think to Matt's point, I think the legislature is the primary audience for our final report. It's to the legislature. I think the PUC we'll certainly look at it, and if we think there's something the PUC can do that we haven't already responded to and given them feedback, that's a place for that. But I do think it's the legislature, and I don't think we should be stuck thinking that it's only changes to the clean heat standard. We may very well say, hey, you need to fund these programs more. That's not something necessarily that's going to be in the clean heat standard itself. It might be a more structural change that we think affects other state policies. So I just want to say that I don't think we need to be boxed into that specific framework. I think also as chair, this is something we'll have to work through, and Ashira has mentioned it. I think we should try to go for one report. I think we'll see where we end up as a group, and I had hoped to sort of reconcile sort of the differing opinions by giving members, sort of an addendum at the end in the appendix to write whatever they want. I've seen that work in other groups, and that way, if there's something that you mostly agree with, or you agree with the body of the report as a whole, you can feel comfortable signing on and then outlining your specific concerns or additions that didn't make it into the final report. I think we can decide as a group how well that'll work, but I really want to caution this group about expecting a report that exactly aligns with every single thing you think or are worried about, just because there's no way we'll produce anything that we can stand behind as a group if we sort of have that black and white thinking. Thanks, Ashira.
Thanks, Mia. Yeah, Srini.
Yeah, to this discussion, what I would like to add is, I think from an equity advisory group, I think we should be focusing on, what type of strategies are relevant or would do the job in accomplishing the objective in the interest of these minority groups we have identified. By focusing on each of these specific demographic groups, we are adding a lot of color to the context here on what the challenges are and what the gaps are. So I don't think, it would be ideal if the PUC and legislature designed a program that's going to, make everyone happy and everyone be pleased with it. I don't think that is realistic. All over the world, people deal with policy changes and figure out a way to navigate things. And so that should not be the limiting factor for us. I think our job is to identify the current gaps, the current challenges. I'm not sure whether we can get too much into the implementation aspect. The implementation aspect, I just don't know whether we have the right expertise here to comment on what would it take to get something done for each of these groups. We can comment at a policy level as at a more of a strategic objective level. So I do think that our job is to identify the gaps and challenges up front, and especially if we are not clear about when we are going to do the equity rubric work. I asked the question to Matt the meeting before last meeting. Dominic. Sorry, Matt. Dominic, the last meeting, and the process he laid out didn't appear to be very simple to me on when we would actually do the rubric work. Whether the measures and the standards will be defined independently, and equity advisory group is going to present the assessment at a later point, or there's going to be some kind of integration or engagement or collaboration as we define these things. So it's not clear to me I would still like to see some of the end product as it comes out. And I think PUC is still working on delivering some of the end product from the work that has been done in the last 8 weeks or so. So anyhow, I just think that this is definitely the opportunity to speak up on what the gaps and challenges are relevant to these groups. So
Thanks, Srini. And by using the metric, do you mean, are you asking about using the metric on the final policy that the PUC produces, or on the report itself? I would imagine that the report would be, we would integrate the metric that's used into the recommendations given in the report. But so I'm a little unclear.
I think if you wait for the whole thing to be defined and do the equity assessment at the end, I think we have lost the opportunity, I believe.
Okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I do have one more thing to say. So I will be a little bit more strict and a little bit more keeping us a little bit more strict on timing and strict on like staying on topic, just so that we are able to get some of these we have a lot to get through. So just making sure that we're able to get through it all. So I hope you give me, I'm not being mean, I haven't turned into Mina Shira, but I I will be a little bit more authoritative on that. So any other thoughts, Jess, on the process, even the ordering? Like I said, this is very much it's a working plan. So things are subject to change. We can move them around as they work better for us, but at least we have a little bit of a structure moving forward. Any other thoughts? Jen?
I guess just one thought I have is the timing for inviting people. That it could be that we need a month head start, and just the question, are we going to invite them, or is it something we ask you to? And if that's the case, then I think like a meeting 2 weeks from now may not be enough time to invite someone. So maybe we should kind of start to think about experts earlier, I mean, in the next week or two, and then send out some invitations, especially because over the summer, a lot of people are on vacation. And I think if we really want to hear from people, we can't expect to reach out and say, hey, can you come next week? They might want to prepare. They might want to know a little bit more about it. So maybe have kind of an action item to think about who either we should invite or we'd like you to invite, but at least a couple, at least 3 weeks ahead of the date.
Thanks, Jen. That makes sense. On my accord, I don't think that it's necessary that it goes through me or Mia, but Mia, feel free to correct me on this. I think that if there is going to be a presentation or something like that, it would be good to have, like, if that's the expectation, like with the LIHEAP person, I know that we, there were specific things that we wanted more information on. So that's, a little bit more weighty, and we want to make sure that we build in enough time into the agenda to be able to do that. But for other people that you might invite who might just give comments during the public comment period or something like that, I don't think it needs to go through anyone. You can just invite them directly. Yeah, go ahead.
I disagree a little bit. I think that if we invite anybody who's an expert on the topic, I don't think we should expect them to wait through the whole meeting. I think we should have a time. I felt bad, honestly, for Curtis when he would come, and I mean, he was there. We were there to hear from him. So I think we should, if someone is going to come and speak to our group, we should give them 10, 15 minutes, whatever, and it should be a specific time, and they know that's when they can come on, and then they can pop off after that, because they may not be interested in everything else around that. And I think we have to be mindful of their time.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah,
So,
I think that makes sense. I think, yeah, I think we're gonna have to strike a balance between not knowing, we don't know what we don't know yet. If there's someone right now that you think that we should really speak to, flag it early and I can make the request, or, you know, we can approve it. But yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to figure out like how we decide as a group well in advance who we want to speak from and get on the same page. So I think it would be helpful if everyone would start to think about it, email me and Nashir about who you'd like to speak to, and then she and I can sort of lay the groundwork of getting the group to approve that that's who they want to speak to, and start planning that in advance. Some of these are a couple weeks out, so that's a little bit difficult. And, you know, as Ashira mentioned, I don't think we should underrate our own expertise. There's a lot of people in this group who have experience with these programs, and we could make that the highlight of just hearing from, you know, what an individual in the group thinks. That's fine. So that's not a great answer, but I think we can strike the balance, and I encourage everyone to just email me and Ashira, and we'll figure out how to get it on the schedule. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. Alrighty, well, with that, then I think we'll go ahead and move into our first discussion, which is the discussion on finding some initial discussion and questions on LIHEAP. So I'll go ahead and close this out. And while I'm pulling it up, I'd also like to just introduce James, who is also from CBI, who's joining us today. They'll be taking some notes in the stead of Dominic, and we ask that you give James a lot of leeway because Dominic's job typing up all those notes is very difficult. So we just, yeah, thank you, James, for volunteering to do that.
Thanks, Ashira. And thanks, everyone.
Okay, great. And here is the document one more time in the chat, and I'll go ahead and share my screen as well. Okay. So I'll give everyone a few moments to kind of scan through what's already here, what's been written by Matt, and then we'll go into a discussion, the things that we really want to get out of. I think we have about 30 minutes to discuss, and the things that we really want to get out of this are, one, if there's any initial recommendations that we can start suggesting, going ahead and suggesting some of those. Thinking about if we have any specific questions for the LIHEAP expert, for any LIHEAP expert that might join either at the next meeting or if they're unable to, some meetings after that. And yeah, kind of finding some figuring out what like the potential barriers might be, the impact, etc. So I'll give everyone a few minutes to digest some of this. And then Matt, I'll actually turn it over to you to kind of start the discussion. And James, when you begin typing, you can just type right underneath what's already written.
Thanks, Ashira. I think I might be waiting for edit access.
Okay, makes sense. There you go, you should have it now. Okay, great. So Matt, if you want to get us started, just walking us through a little bit of what you were thinking, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Yeah, so speaking on behalf of those that deliver heating fuel assistance, and most of it is delivered fuels. About 4 or 5% identify as electric as their primary source of heat. And yes, there's natural gas that's mostly in Chittenden County, a little bit of Franklin County, a little bit in Addison County, but there's a disproportionate percentage of Vermonters who rely on kerosene, which is because it doesn't gel in outdoor tanks, but it is the most expensive heat per BTU other than resistance heat. And it's not an insignificant amount of money, and not an insignificant amount, about $30 million goes out the door every year, between 20 and 30 million, depending on what the federal government gives to the states in the form of a block grant. And about 20,000 Vermont families receive some sort of assistance. It doesn't pay for all of their heat. In a good year, it pays for about 60% on average. In a not so great year, it's about 40%. And of course, the concern is, well, there's too many concerns, but one of the thoughts was, as whatever the fee, the compliance fee is for those that can't reduce their fossil fuel consumption in this community, that fee gets borne by the state of Vermont. That's in the statute. And then that reduces the buying capacity of the state. And I've gotten lots of questions about, and I've been a part of the LIHEAP task force for 18 years now. So I've got a lot of questions about, well, what else could they do to improve their buying capacity if it is a 10 cent or 20 cent or 70 cent fee attached to a clean heat compliance fee. And a lot of those questions were addressed about 15 years ago when they started a margin over rack program. They essentially fixed the prices that the state pays for fuel delivered by fuel dealers. So the question that I have for Richard Giddings, and he may not know the answer, but at least we can start the conversation, which is, how do you set the regulated price to consumers, given the differences in how fuel companies buy their fuel and who is the obligated party and what the compliance fee will be? And the important thing is that this is a voluntary program. You don't have to participate in it as a consumer. You don't have to participate in it as a dealer. And the concern is that the 20,000 families, if this isn't figured out, the 20,000 families that depend on delivered liquid fuels, depend on that infrastructure, might be harmed by the clean heat standard. And how do we mitigate that? And that's where the perspective that I come from.
Thanks, Matt. Jen, go ahead.
Matt, is there a way that the state could be exempt from the compliance fee?
We asked that. I advocate for that, and that was the legislature did not adopt that amendment. We also asked that propane conversions from kerosene heated homes, a lower cost, lower carbon fuel, be considered as a measure, and that was rejected as well.
Is that something that, as an equity group, we could advocate for?
Yep, that would be part. I would put that in the basket of. I see there's two baskets of making this work. One is recommendations to the PUC and how they write the regulation or the draft rule, which may or may not be adopted by the legislature, and the other is the statutory changes that have to occur in order for this recommendation to work, or this draft regulation to work. And I think the tag has a set that will go in each basket. And I think this one would go in the change the law basket, because the PUC couldn't do it unilaterally without legislative permission.
I guess my other question is, so that would be for the state legislature to do. I mean, I've run across this with LIHEAP, when someone tries to put some of their electric, some of their heating needs into electric, the idea that you have to name a primary source. I'm wondering, do you see any movement at a federal level to change some of the LIHEAP rules as the whole country is trying to electrify? is there a way to, I don't know, influence that part of LIHEAP?
Yeah. But that's a great question, and keep in mind that it's not the low income heating assistance program, but the low income home energy assistance program, and more than half of the dollars that the federal government, that Congress sends out to the states, goes for air conditioning. So it is largely, in many ways, it's often called the biggest subsidy to the electric utilities is LIHEAP. Also a subsidy to those that use fossil fuels in the Northeast, which is a small pool of that. Yeah, there's no reason why someone couldn't, if someone installed the heat pump and said it delivered, it's my primary heating source, there's no reason why they couldn't check that box and the money would go to Green Mountain Power, Washington Electric Co-op, or Burlington Electric rather than the fuel dealer. They can do that now. And they can do that with wood as well. They can check off wood as being their primary source of heat and have that paid for. Now, in many cases, especially pre-existing homes, as we've discussed ad nauseum, not for new construction, but for pre-existing homes, oftentimes electric or wood alone isn't going to supply 100% of the heat. And so the rest of that balance, whether it's propane or kerosene or heating oil or natural gas, would come from their own pocket.
Right. So there's not, you don't know of any movement that's maybe encompassing more than one primary, that takes into the reality that often homes do heat from many sources.
Yeah, that would be a great question for Richard Giddings, Jen, because he might know whether or not they could do that by rule. That they're an agency that was run by rules. They just did a whole rule revision about 3 weeks ago, and they could certainly do it again as long as it complies with federal law, but he would be the expert at that. And I think that's a great question for Richard.
Thank you.
To address.
I'll ask him. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Mia, and then we have Jeff.
Yeah, thanks. I actually was on a call with one of Jen's colleagues about weatherization issues, Dwight DeCoster, and he did mention that is a concern of his that I'm interested in asking Richard Giddings about. As more people get heat pumps, even though there's many people who won't, there are going to be a lot of homes where it's difficult to fully wean off of fossil fuels, and then these households are faced with a challenge of, like, if I've only got LIHEAP assistance for fossil fuels for kerosene or propane, that's a pretty direct incentive not to run their heat pump. I think it seems like, from what I've heard, and Jeff I'm sure wants to weigh in on this, some of this is an education thing, but I think some of it is if you're only getting assistance with one, that could put people in a really tough position. And I think Dwight said something to the effect of that would be a federal rule and something he's advocated for. But if Richard kind of signs on to that agreement, I do think that's a really powerful place for the EAG to intervene and say the state should work with the federal government to promote, more flexibility in LIHEAP to encourage people to use their heat pumps or be more flexible and select more than one primary fuel type. So that's something I really want to ask Richard about, how viable that is. And it seems like it's always exciting to hear of something that could be improved without just money. So I don't know, Jeff, do you have any thoughts on kind of that take?
Yeah.
We emailed a little bit about that.
Yeah, and Dwight and I and Richard have talked about this. Like Matt said, this is my opinion, and definitely we need Richard's the expert, but ESD or LIHEAP's in the same office, DCF, that I am, and we work together a lot. So I do know quite a bit about LIHEAP, and I know that, like Matt said, only 60% of an average client's fuel is paid for through the fuel assistance award. So when Dwight says that to me, I push back and I say, well, Dwight, we got to make sure we do good client education and let them know that still use this heat pump, but use it at this time when it's less expensive than your oil award, but we're going to utilize your whole oil fuel assistance award. So you're getting your full use of the fuel assistance, and you're also getting a heat pump that is going to be less expensive than anything you can run when you use it at these certain times. That, to me, is my opinion at this point in time. But when we get to the point where maybe the fuel split isn't as dramatic, like they need 2 awards in order to most efficiently or less expensively heat their home, that may be a very good thing. I do know, I've worked here quite a while. I remember Richard Maffei, who was the longtime fuel assistance chief, and he always said Vermont's got one of the most complicated fuel assistance programs, that they really do a lot of behind the scenes calculating to make sure that the award gets out there in the most beneficial way to client. A lot of states, it's really simple. Vermont takes the time. So we got to make sure we don't add administrative burden that doesn't result in benefits to the clients, just eats up more ESD time to do it, is my pure opinion. But definitely Richard would be a great person to get on this call.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
And before we
Also
go
add
to
that-
Jeannie, I just wanted to clarify with Mia. So you were saying that where exactly is it? Yeah, so this might be a good place for the EAG to convene and say that the state should work with the federal government to change. And I wanted to make sure that we captured what you said correctly. So could you talk a little bit more about changing what in particular, and like
Sure,
how
yeah, I
do you
can-
see that in a report?
Yeah, so I can clarify. So basically, potentially a problem. I don't think we know for sure, but potentially a problem is you can only select one type of fuel assistance. So like only kerosene or only electric or only fuel oil. And as we sort of get more homes on heat pump, which is the goal of the clean heat standard, there are homes that, you know,
No.
will sort
I'm
of-
sorry, Mia. I'm sorry, Mia. I can't let that lie. That's not the goal of the Clean Heat
Okay,
Standard.
a
That
lie
is
is
not
a strong
absolutely
way of
not the
saying
goal
that,
of the
Matt.
Clean Heat Standard. The Clean Heat Standard goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with heating.
Okay.
It's not to
So,
put people on electricity.
Matt, we'll come back to you if we can let Mia complete her thought, and then we'll come back.
Okay, so I did misspeak, but I think a lie is a really strong way of characterizing what I just said, Matt. So I meant to say that one of the eligible clean heat measures is heat pumps, and I think everyone hopes that more will be put into homes. So as I was saying, when more homes have heat pumps, they're going to have the option to use electricity, but they may still be reliant on fuel sources, fossil fuel sources. So there might be a potential to advocate that the LIHEAP program allows people to select more than one type of fuel instead of just a primary fuel. So I'd like to ask Richard whether he thinks there's value. It's I think a federal would be a federal rulemaking, but it would be beneficial to ask him whether or not we should recommend that the state does something with the federal government. So I don't have a clear, thanks for clarifying, Ashir. I don't have a clear recommendation on exactly what should be done or what's in the state's power, but I think it would be beneficial to flag that in the report if experts like Richard think it's warranted. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry to be a little windy on that. I don't know exactly what we're looking for, Ashira.
Yeah, I think so. And Shuni, I see your hand up. Thank you for being patient. I did want to just quickly go back to Matt so that we can just make sure that that was clarified, and then we'll go over to you.
So this particular demographic group doesn't strike as a low-hanging fruit to me. What I mean by that is, if you look at the contribution from the dashboard on Vermont greenhouse gas emissions, kerosene consumption has been coming down significantly over the last 5-10 years or so, and it represents only 0.5% of the total thermal related greenhouse gas emissions. And it sounds like a significantly challenging technical problem to solve, with whatever clean heat measures that people can think of for the small group of residents in Vermont. So if you, in my opinion, if you apply the 80-20 rule and devote all the resources, this may not be the area where you want to devote the resources. If you're looking for a productive path towards reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, this will be the wrong place to focus on initially, because it's so hard. Technically, it's very hard to do, And it's a very small contribution to begin with, 0.5%. 0.5% is within like a measuring error of the estimate of greenhouse gas emissions. So I would say maybe focus on providing clean heat, make sure that maybe this comes as an exception in the policy that PUC develops and says that maybe this group needs to be helped as much as possible without the burden of a typical clean heat measure that could be punitive. Make sure that whatever we do is not punitive to this particular group. And work on the low income and the middle income part of the demographics, where there are easier opportunities to do clean, greenhouse gas emission reductions. And maybe there is a federal program here that can help to figure out how to easily transition from this, small percentage of kerosene users and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions eventually. But in my opinion, even if you do a fantastic job of not being punitive and do everything right, you're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 0.5%. That's all. So I just think that we need to be a little bit more pragmatic about, how we focus on these segments.
Thank you, Srini. Jeff, I see your hand. If it's you're on mute, but I do want to so if you can hold that thought, I do want to just go back to Matt and make sure that your thought was addressed with Mia.
Yes. This program is often confused by people that think it's an electrification program. It is not. It is a fuel neutral program designed to promote, incentivize the use of fuels that reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the thermal sector. There are many ways to achieve that, and that's why we're going through this tremendous amount of work. I would also add that it was discussed during the formation of this legislation. Why not just say to anyone receiving low-income home energy assistance dollars, can't use it for fossil? I suggested it. Not suggesting they actually pass it, but saying that would be the fastest way to achieve what you want, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by doing that. And everyone recognized that that would be a failure in providing critical heat for the low-income community.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to, and Srini, I'm sorry, I probably took what you said the wrong way, but I just want to say, as far as my view, we're on the equity advisory group, and it isn't a rarity to see our clients in weatherization heating their home, typically a mobile home with kerosene. It's common. I could get you the numbers, but those to me are the folks that we need to protect, and I don't think you're inferring otherwise. But to me, they're the ones that pay the highest fuel price now and add 70 cents or whatever the cents onto it. That could just put more people homeless. So I think protecting them somehow is ultimately what we need to do with this group. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And I wanted to pause as well, one, to give James a few minutes to catch up, but also a few seconds to catch up, but also with the notes that we're taking, this is not a transcript. We have everything that you're saying recorded, so we have that. This is really for us to help build the report. So if, as we're doing this, you see anything that you are feeling like, hey, I was mischaracterized, or hey, I have more that I could say about this, or anything, or like, I'd like to say it in this way, so that's the way that it's put in the report, you can feel free to also jump into this document and rewrite it, because we have what you said recorded. And so while we are live, this is your document to work with. But afterwards, I am going to remove the permission so that it's view only. And if you do change anything, just make sure you flag it for us and let us know that you have changed something. But I just wanted to let everybody know that is you can do that. The point of this is to make a better report in the end. And with that, I'll go over to Pike.
Yeah, thanks. Just two quick questions. First to Mia. Mia, I don't think that Matt said that you were lying. I think he said that that statement can't lie there or can't stand there, can't be there. He has to refer to that statement. So I just wanted to, that's how I read what Matt said. I don't think he was calling you a liar there. And then another quick point to Matt. Matt said that the clean heat standard is a fuel neutral. That is not quite true. The clean heat standards favors wood. DPS has a plan to double the wood use in the thermal sector, and it therefore does not have any drawdown or emissions requirements. The drawdown is only for liquid and gaseous fuels. So solid fuel, i.e. wood, has no drawdown. Thanks.
Thank you. And I do want to remind us to also, stay on the discussion of LIHEAP as much as we can. And go ahead, Srini.
No, I just wanted to say that, Jeff, I hope I didn't say it the wrong way, but, in trying to solve problems like this, focusing on this segment without due consideration will result in unintended consequences. So all I'm saying is make sure that we don't do anything to be punitive to this particular group, because this is a very small contribution to the total problem, and it's not worth putting in a complicated policy and mess it up. That's all I'm trying to say. I would rather focus on being punitive to people who are continue to use natural gas, and who live in like very big houses, and they are the least motivated to adopt any clean heat measure, because of infrastructure limitations and all that stuff. So I would rather see the punitive part being, favored towards those bigger greenhouse emission contributors to begin with. So
I figured as much. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thanks, Srini. Yeah, Matt.
Yes, just to affirm what Pike said. I said I can't let that statement lie there. Not that you lied in that statement, Mia, but I apologize if you took any offense.
I see. I'm sorry for misinterpreting you. Again, I do think this is going to be the type of discussion where if we get too hung up on language, it's really going to derail conversations, as the chair has asked us to keep on track. Noted, though, that it can be easy to just short circuit what Act 18 actually does, and that's worth flagging. So thanks.
So to Jeff and Srini's point, and Richard would have the latest numbers, and he might even have some trends, but the data that we received in 2023 showed that, kerosene kerosene, outdoor tanks, modular homes, trailers, represents about 8% of our distillate sales. So you're right, it's small. And when you look at greenhouse gas emissions, even smaller, and those homes generally aren't large, so they use less fuel. However, it is expensive per gallon per BTU, and the people that have kerosene generally don't have the same amount of income as that people live in 2,000 square foot homes that are served by natural gas in Chittenden County. However, it represents about, this is 2023 numbers, 16% of LIHEAP homes. So that is not an insignificant amount of homes that would be impacted should there be a fee and reduce their buying. Well, there is going to be a fee, but if this passes, but reduce their buying capacity and the state's buying capacity, because not just the fuel that the state buys and puts in their tank, it's the fuel that they have to then fill the rest of the tank with when the money runs out from the federal government as distributed by the state. So it's 16%, which gets to the reasons why there was a discussion about whether or not to exempt that small percentage of homes that rely on outdoor fuel, or to allow them to either be exempt from the fee or to do another measure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve efficiency, and reduce cost that isn't necessarily a biofuel, a wood product, or electricity, such as propane. Thanks.
I'm gonna take a pause. There's a couple people that we haven't heard from, and I want to make sure that you have a chance to speak as well. Are there any other like questions that you have, even just substantial, like questions about the content that we could note down and ask next meeting, or are there any gaps that we're seeing, any additional research that we might have to do? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
With LIHEAP, I think we're kind of saying there's an assumption that we would draw down those funds faster as a result. We haven't discussed augmenting that fund so that there is, it's a neutral impact. That's obviously not something that we can do ourselves, but recommend as an action. To be honest, I don't understand if there is existing funds to augment LIHEAP that are available. I'd be interested to hear from Richard, and how can we boost that? Just, I'm just trying to think of a neutral impact to any residents that we might have in our communities that are relying on LIHEAP now, and they wouldn't see a reduction. I just think about folks who put blankets over their windows, or they have other bills to pay, and so they have to reduce heating costs and sacrifice their own comfort during the winter to make ends meet. And so just trying to reconcile that we have a neutral impact.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else, especially those who haven't had the chance to say anything? So, thinking a little bit more, I was wondering if we have any more thoughts on implementation. So if this was implemented, what are some of the things that the PUC might need to really consider on the implementation end? Or for LIHEAP recipients? Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I think I'd just echo what Chris just mentioned. Really, I know that, and I think this is a great question to ask Richard, would be the state supplemental funds for LIHEAP. That's really the only thing that I can think of. If this was implemented, how we'd mitigate that impact, and it seems to be additional funds for the program. So I know that they did add some state supplemental funds during COVID, I believe, but maybe some more context as to how that occurred. That was likely one-time funding, but basically how those funds were utilized and what kind of additional services they were able to offer LIHEAP recipients during that time of supplemental funding could be some good context for how a potential supplemental funding under Clean Heat Standard would work. But we can look back and use that as a proxy, probably.
Thanks, Ben. Mia?
Yeah, I think if we do have experts come in, I think we should ask anyone we invite, like, what would you say we should ask the PUC to do, if anything? I'm not clear that there is something that the PUC has the power, but also, like, what would you ask the legislature or state government to do for the programs you oversee? What do you think would make the biggest change? And so I think that's the most direct input we could get for this report, and to sort of raise up those voices and bring that to the attention of the report. So I think we should ask Richard about those things.
Thanks, Mia. And so in the next couple minutes, we'll go ahead and open it to public comment. But before that, I just want to give the members of the EAG one more chance. If you have any just even general thoughts about LIHEAP, go ahead.
Yeah, so Matt mentioned that LIHEAP has a way to get I'll just simplify it, reduced rate for fuel for LIHEAP clients, why couldn't just that formula or how they do that be changed to be a clean heat standard markup, for lack of knowing what better to call it? Just, exempt them from that fee that's going to be added onto the fuel costs. I think we kind of just need to keep pushing it, whether it's in one of those two baskets that Matt described, and not give up on it, because I just think it'd be a really good way to protect low-income Vermonters. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We asked for one of two things. We asked for that during the legislative process to exempt gallons delivered to LIHEAP customers. In lieu of that, we said, if you don't do that, we need to build the compliance cost, which we still don't know what it is. Could be 1 cent, could be $1, somewhere in between, into the margin over rack, which is the fixed delivery cost that we get delivered, that we get every day, to determine what we can charge the state of Vermont for fuel assistance. So they agreed to take that. So in statute, the margin over rack fixed cost that a fuel dealer gets compensated for delivering to a fuel assistance customer will include, unless there's a change in the statute, will include the compliance cost, the yet to be determined compliance cost, so that they'll deliver kerosene at the current margin over rack rate plus the compliance cost. That will be the money that goes to the fuel dealer.
And Matt, can I ask you to repeat that one more time slowly so that we can make sure that we capture it?
Yeah. So
If we ask Matt to write this down, I'm just wondering for James's benefit,
I
whatever
can do
works
that.
best, but
I can do
feel bad
that.
for James, that's a lot.
Yeah, Matt, if
price-
you're able to write that down.
Yeah, just in summary, and I will send that to James, but the pricing program is just established in the rule, requires fuel dealers to deliver at a set price as established by the Fuel Assistance Office on a daily basis. Rather than exempt them, the legislature determined that it would be better to build that compliance cost, that still undetermined compliance cost, into the margin over rack price, the mandated price that fuel dealers must deliver to their customers who receive fuel assistance when the funds are paid for by fuel assistance money. And I will happily write that up.
Thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
So just a clarification, Matt, the money, so that cost, the margin over rack with the compliance cost built in, is what fuel dealers get paid, but that's what also comes out of LIHEAP to pay the fuel dealers.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So effectively that compliance cost is built into what's getting paid out of the LIHEAP fund, but the other side of the
Will
coin
be
is
built in if the legislature passes the clean heat standard, and yes.
Right. So yeah, the flip side of that would be to basically bolster, to mitigate an impact on LIHEAP, we'd need to bolster the funds to basically cover the additional compliance costs. That would be the one way to solve it. I'm just trying to,
we've reduced buying capacity by whatever the amount the compliance fee is, or the legislature opens up the statute and says, let's remove gallons delivered to fuel assistance customers. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just want a clarification. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and open it to any comments or questions from the public. And just a reminder for this, we're going to ask you to keep them to 2 minutes just to begin with, so that we can get through as many people as we need. And if we have enough time, then we can circle back to you and you can complete a thought if you need to. So we'll go ahead and open it up. Feel free to either raise your hand or speak directly into the room if you have a comment.
I'm John McCormick, and I want to salute the Equity Advisory Group for taking up in a comprehensive way this serious discussion. You have to know that we're not talking about just 2027 or 2028. The clean heat standard is designed to increase the cost of fuels over time to further encourage people to make the shift. So during the time that LIHEAP will be providing to a client, there is a point in time where either LIHEAP has exhausted its funds or the closing date. if there's additional need for that family to get additional fuel, they are going to have to pay that higher price. And there is the sum and substance of the pain. Now, you should also know that when a person applies to LIHEAP, they have to agree to have their home weatherized. So the relationship between LIHEAP and Weather Assistance Program, LIHEAP provides that client's or applicant's information to WAP, and WAP will go out and do the analysis on that home. You can't separate the two. If the legislature ever said, well, we've got Clean Heat Standard, now we can do away with that 2-cent fee in the Weatherization Assistance Program, under federal rules, you cannot. LIHEAP requires that there be a weatherization assistance program to reduce the demand for oil in that home and all the other homes, so that LIHEAP is not carrying an unneeded weight. I should also say, we don't know what's going to happen on November 5. Trump zeroed out LIHEAP in his FY 2018 and 2019 budget. We do not know what the next Congress and the next White House is going to do regarding LIHEAP. As LIHEAP,
you have
thank
about
you.
20 more seconds. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say again, I appreciate all of your efforts to do this. If you have a variety of subsidies for LIHEAP clients, I suppose there are people who can argue, well, I am not a client of LIHEAP, but I damn sure need a subsidy because I cannot do any of the weatherization retrofits. And that includes me. I live in a log home. I have no insulation on my walls. Thank you.
I'll have to stop you there, but we can come back to you if there's no other comments.
Thank you kindly.
So, is there anyone else who has a public comment? Go ahead, Ben. Ben, you might be on mute. We can't hear you, but you can go ahead.
Apologies. There was a notification that the meeting was being recorded, which did not allow me to unmute. Ben Edgerly Walsh with VPIRG. I actually don't agree with John on everything, but wanted to echo some of his comments. As some of you probably know, I was involved in the legislative process that got the Affordable Heat Act to this point. I've been deep in the legislature the last few months, have been sort of following this group's work from afar, but really just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you. I know while there are disagreements within this group, within the legislature on this policy and its intents and effects, I know that the legislature worked really hard to design what they believed was an equitable program. That was a program that was intended to be equitable, and I know you all are rolling up your sleeves to make it as equitable as possible. And I know that's a very complicated task. So thank you so much. You will be seeing a lot more of me in these meetings in the future, and I'm certainly happy to work with you all if that is useful to you.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the public? Okay. From the EAG group, are there any responses? Or before we go back to the EAG, John McCormick, if you haven't finished your thought, you have a little bit more time.
John McCormick, I just wanted to say again that LIHEAP does not provide 12 months of assistance, and these individuals will pay higher prices and may still not be able to retrofit their homes. And I think it has been said that perhaps 30% of Vermont's homes could not be retrofitted under the Clean Heat Standard. This train is moving faster, and when it hits, it's going to hurt. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we have Jen and we have Mia. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks. I'm hoping to just get a little clarification from you, Jeff. I believe it's true that renters can get LIHEAP. And also just clarification on the comment from John about weatherization. That a home has to be weatherized before you get LIHEAP. I'm not sure that I've run into that.
Yeah, so the LIHEAP clients, when they get their award, they're told they're eligible for weatherization and should need to apply. I don't know the exact language, but they aren't, obviously we can't serve enough, they're not prohibited from receiving LIHEAP if they don't get their home weatherized. Nobody tracks that per se, and we don't have the capacity to serve everyone so that they can get LIHEAP. We're working on it. We prioritize LIHEAP clients for sure. And what was your first question? Sorry.
Renters are eligible for LIHEAP, right?
Yes, we had a back and forth with Richard. That is true, and they do get LIHEAP assistance.
Okay.
Can get it. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you. Yeah, Mia and then Matt, and then we'll have to move on.
Yeah, just a question about that stat that you mentioned about the 30% of homes can't be retrofitted. Feel like I've heard that before, but I haven't seen it written down somewhere. I'd appreciate getting that because it seems like if we can follow up on that, that would be useful for our report.
And is that directed towards John McCormick?
Oh, yes, sorry, to John. Yeah.
Okay. John, is that something that you might be able to send us over? I'm not sure if he's still there, but we can follow up with him via email.
There, John McCormick. It has been said by several of your members that 30% of homes possibly cannot be retrofitted with the clean heat standard technology. For reasons of building structure, wiring, etc. Again, I live in a nice log home, but I cannot put in a heat pump. So I would appeal to Jeff and Matt and Chris to answer that question, Mia. Thank you.
Thanks. We can follow up. I don't want to derail this session, but yeah, I'd like our assertions in our report to be supported by research when we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just to confirm, there's no one's denied fuel assistance if they haven't had their home weatherized. It provides essentially a list, a lead list that is undersubscribed because there's not enough capacity to address. But it's also, think about half of the population, roughly 10,000 families, are renters. And yes, there is weatherization funds for commercial for some renters, but it's a little bit harder to access than, because you got to get the landlord to sign off, as Jeff can explain, because he lives and breathes this stuff. But yeah, that's the conundrum, right? How do you convince a landlord to enter into a contract with weatherization to make their home more safe, warm, and comfortable and cool in the summertime when they're not paying the bills, when they're not paying the electric bill, and they're not paying the fuel bill? That's a challenge, which weatherization has been struggling with forever.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comments, and we are going to move on to our next topic of discussion, which is households and homes that are not readily able to access the clean heat standard measures. So I'll give, and James, that will be in a new box, and so let's just find that quickly. So that is actually on page 1 at the bottom of the box. We can go ahead and get started with that. So I'll give everyone, again, a few moments to read over what is already there. And then when we open the discussion, we'll start with Ben. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and read. Okay. Ben, when you're ready, you can go ahead and start walking us through it.
Sure. Yeah, so as we'll see here, I think really the overarching theme of what I think, basically this whole idea of which homes and households cannot readily access clean heat measures, this really comes down to really the style of home and, really what's physically present at the household, in large part. Aside from renters, comes down to, housing style and existing conditions on site. I think, there's broadly a tremendous need in Vermont, especially amongst low-income Vermonters, for home repair that is needed in the home. When we talk about heating systems broadly, there's of course ductless heat pumps, but we know that those can be challenging or impossible to put in mobile homes. And then, if you are to put in a heat pump into a mobile home, generally, the only way for that home to benefit from a heat pump would be to a ducted heat pump, like a dual fuel option, for example, which could require extensive ductwork repair to make that happen. And another thing just broadly to mention too is depending on the home, mobile home age, you could be dealing with a 2-inch wall cavity, for example, which is, when you just think about that from a structural perspective, that could eliminate, again, the option for heat pumps. So when you just think about anything being a 2-inch wall cavity, just kind of saying that and thinking about what that means, it's like that therein lies some of the issues with mobile homes generally, that just the way they're constructed. With renters and multifamily properties, you deal with, of course, the split incentive, which I think multiple other people have noted in their sections. So really it comes down to the low quality homes and older homes in Vermont, needing, potentially extensive repair work done before they can take advantage of a clean heat measure. So that's kind of the broad theme there. And then there's infrastructure. I guess I'd boil it down to infrastructure and structural barriers for site built homes in Vermont. There's a whole bunch of data out there and everything. So I think that's really the underlying kind of through line of this section. So,
Thanks, Ben. And for this one, just to put a little bit more boundaries on the conversation, I would ask, because we do have separate sections on renters and mobile homes. So if we can think about the groups that are outside of those two. I'll go ahead and open it up. If anyone has any thoughts and wants to start the conversation, go ahead, Chris.
When we say access, I kind of view that as also including like Jeff's incredible program. Jeff's got a wait list, and there's limited resources. So there's like a ramp up time to be able to access those services. So a lot of the pathways is there a clean heat measure that's available to them, or the funding? Great, those two are there, but the capacity to make that switch, to do that weatherization, to do the install, just being able to get the money or any the technical assistance needed to access those solutions. So when I think of access, it's not just, is there a measure for them? It's just helping them access programs available to them. And that's, we need to document that a little bit better in all of our sections. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so my comment on this was, I think Ben summed it up pretty good, and my comments are more for people above our low income weatherization program, because that works free, but for moderate and up, just having the work done that our program does, if they were to hire a contractor, could be $20,000 or more for a comprehensive weatherization project. But related to this subset of homes, these people have, there's going to be leaky roofs, there's going to be vermiculite in an attic, and one, you know, we see 1 in 10 homes, maybe moderate income, it's 1 in 12 homes, not as often, but it's you know, a $10,000 to $20,000, sometimes $30,000 abatement to get that vermiculite out of the attic, and it needs to be removed because a contractor can't go up there and insulate on top of it, air seal it. So there's just a lot of added expenses on top of very expensive weatherization work that I think is going to be an affordability issue above that we're not even thinking of, and shortage of contractors, et cetera. So affordability for moderate income folks is going to be important to think of, as well as for low income folks. So thanks.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Mia and then Srini.
Yeah, just to clarify, when we outlined this part of the report, I think we were thinking of ways like certain things are going to come up over and over again, and like you can have vermiculite in single family homes and moderate family, like things that are going to kind of we see as meta narratives in our report to kind of coalesce them in one section. So that's kind of what this was for. I don't think we have to restrict it to anything in particular, but just the idea that a lot of our housing stock is going to be really challenging to transition. And I think Jeff's right to bring up things like vermiculite. And in particular, I think it's worth highlighting that there's very little funding right now at the state level to cover things like that. Home repairs, certainly the WAP program does great work. You know, the state's energy efficiency utilities have some funding, but it's super limited. So there's just not money. And one thing that I see as a really big problem with the clean heat standard is doing things like panel upgrades or vermiculite remediation has no emissions reductions savings. So there's no benefit that I can see under the clean heat standard to doing those things, but they're going to be really crucial for low income households to be able to actually access weatherization and other improvements. I should say low and moderate income households. So I'd love to see our final report really emphasize the fact that we need to be thinking more holistically about improving our housing stock rather than just emissions reductions if we're really serious about equity. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. Go ahead, Srini.
Yeah, what I was going to, I think the context that Ben gave is very helpful. You know, I got a couple of suggestions I would like to make here to make this more specific, or again, you know, I like the approach of, from an equity perspective, defining all the challenges and the gaps we have today in a fashion that actually gets the attention of PUC and gets the attention of the legislature. I think that's what we need to focus on. So to that extent, what I would like to suggest here is, if I look at the definition of low income based on the family size, 81,000, anyone who's below 81,000 is characterized as low income. How many households would fit in this category of the 235,000 households or so in Vermont? How many households would fit that category?
And is that a question that you're posing to the EAP?
Yeah, to Ben. Yeah, so that's one question that would be helpful. And if it is low income households, chances are that these are not, you know, big houses. These are probably a combination of older houses and smaller houses. Maybe it'll be helpful to add some color to that as well. And to Jeff's point about other infrastructure limitations that stop you from, even if the funding is available through WAP, there are other limitations such as the structural leaks, the type of insulation, safety-related precautions you have to take for the type of insulation, other material that is in the household. How much of that problem that you typically see, do you see that in 50% of the low-income households, or like more like 20% of the households? So those type of specific attributes can help define from an equity perspective how challenging it's going to be and what are the current gaps. So those are my suggestions on that.
Thank you, Srini. Yeah, we'll go to Ben and then Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Srini. Those are some great suggestions for providing context to the magnitude of the problem. And just wanted to offer one correction. I think you might have said it differently, but you said $81,000 area median income. I think you meant 80% AMI and less. Just for the record, I'm talking about 80% AMI and lower, not household income of 80,000 and lower. I think that would be above the income. But yeah, that's my only comments there. But yeah, thanks for those suggestions.
It's Ben. Chris.
So the statute defines customers with low income as 60% AMI, and then middle income as 60 to 120. So sorry, I knew what you were getting at. Just so 60% for a 2-person household. That's that's in across Vermont. That's 49,200. That's in below. That's what we're talking about.
And 80% AMI and lower is eligible for weatherization assistance program. So there we go. Yeah, that's that's what we're talking about.
Sorry.
Yep. No, all good. Yeah.
Thanks.
Oops.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Mia.
I mean, I would be interested in data to kind of get our hands around how much of the housing stock we really think would be, it's multifaceted, but like very challenging to make substantial improvements to reduce fossil fuel use in those homes. I'd be interested in knowing kind of what's out there. We talked about in the public comment period, that stat of 1/3 of the homes can't be, I guess, I'm not sure what the criteria was, but electrified maybe. I'm not sure what the definition was. So I'm not familiar with anything that sort of definitively said how much of our housing stock is easier versus very difficult to, I guess, decarbonize. I think that the terms are important here, but I haven't seen that data. I don't know if anyone else here has.
Yeah, has anyone else?
Remember to mute if we're not on talking. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff, and then Srini.
I can get the data Srini asked for out of X number of homes we weatherize. What percentage have to have funds to address either a significant home repair or vermiculite, aka our weatherization funds don't address. I can get that for you.
And Jeff, do you mind also just writing down exactly what that data is that you're getting so that we can make sure we capture in the notes, and I'll make sure that we can follow up on it as well. Thank you. Srini, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of this data, I think we can collect from different sources, I believe. For example, VGS, Vermont Gas Service, has a report somewhere that I have come across when we did the climate action plan for South Burlington that identifies the number of customers for the natural gas, residential customers for natural gas service who do not have a centralized HVAC. They will use like a hot water circulation system for heat. And those homes are in general harder to convert because you don't have a ductwork, and you have to rely on, especially if it is a bigger house, older house, there's compartmentalized. You have to use multiple heat pumps to electrify. So that's a basic infrastructure limitation. So I think Vermont Gas Service has got data like that where they identify how much of the utility is served without the HVAC benefits. So
thank you. Yeah, Matt, go ahead, and then Jen.
That is fantastic data that VGS has and is able to utilize. And part of it is because they're a utility with 50,000 customers, whereas the deliverable fuel industry and the heating sector is 250 different random companies of all shapes and sizes. But I would love that data. If there's some way that we could figure out, maybe we could extrapolate what we know from the weatherization program versus different surveys that we've conducted, because the best number that I have is an estimate. But I think it's really important to get at. So just want to echo that.
And just so that we can be very clear, I would love somebody, because we're capturing the notes, but I think we're missing exactly what the data is that we're looking for. So if Jeff or Matt or Srini, if any of you are able to send me just like a sentence with the specific, or go into the document itself and write it down, the specific data that we're looking for, to make sure that we don't lose that. And then if you're on the phone, I think John McCormick, if you don't mind just going ahead and muting yourself, or I'll go ahead and mute yourself, but just remember when you come back online to unmute yourself. We're hearing some background noise. So we'll go to Jen and then we'll go to Pike.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember that sometimes weatherization or reduction of fossil fuel can be incremental. So you might have a house that takes a number of steps over a number of years, and it may not be that a house is suddenly at net zero, but every time you add a measure or you add more weatherization and you're reducing the fossil fuel use, that will also reduce the amount of money spent on fossil fuel. So I think it's not it's not you're totally weatherized or you're not. I think people can take steps to get closer to using less fossil fuel.
Thanks, Jen. Go ahead, Pike.
Yeah, I don't know how it's accessible or if it's accessible, but every town lister's card advises what kind of heating system each building has. So there is a lot of information out there about what's a furnace and what's a boiler. Again, I don't know how it can be accessible, but if there's someone smarter than me out there, maybe there's some kind of database where all the listers cards or all tax rolls are available.
Does anybody know of that resource? Mia.
Well, the challenge would be to aggregate it in one spreadsheet, and I don't know the answer to that, but great suggestion, Pike.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is what Pike's meant. There is grand list data available. I don't think that's on the grand list, so I don't know if that exists only. So the tax department collects data that each town collects for tax purposes. I just don't think it goes into that much detail from what I've seen. There's a few different types of like sort of studies out there. There's census data that says what type of fuel different households use, including by renters and owners. That's information we have. I just don't know like how helpful that is. There's also some sort of high level building survey data, but from what I understand of like my own research into our housing stock, none of it paints a full picture about like what are the biggest red flags that a home is going to have, significant challenges in being either weatherized or electrified, I'll say, if those are the sort of the things we're interested in. So I'd be happy to kind of, my agency aggregates some data. I'd kind of be happy to share with this group for a subsequent meeting sort of like what is sort of readily known, and maybe the experts in this group could pinpoint some features within that we could take a guess as to what homes are going to be the most problematic. I think it could be helpful sort of demonstrating the scale of the problem if we have some rough numbers on how many Vermont homes are going to be seriously challenged if we can define that landscape. But I'd be happy to follow up with sort of what's available.
Thank you, Mia. Go ahead, Chris.
So just I popped in the chat for ease of everyone understanding what I'm talking about. When we say something's equitable, there's not just one definition. And the guiding principles of the just transition defines contextual equity to ensure that the development of mitigation and adapt strategies at statewide and local levels are taking the disparities into account. It's just really important to define for this section that there needs to be a development of mitigation adaptation strategies for this population, despite how small it is. So when folks say things like, oh, this was designed and it's equitable, it's just, well, what do you mean it's equitable? So this contextual piece is one, it would be nice to have a strong statement from this group of, hey, what are you going to do for this population? This can't be something that we just steamroll over saying carbon reduction is more important, that we just need to move forward. There has to be a mitigation strategy, and it's not clear that one was presented in the draft as proposed.
Thanks, Chris. Okay. I'm inclined to go ahead and open to public comment a little bit earlier so that we have some more time to reflect on the comment as well. And then we can spend a little bit more time discussing if the EAG members have more they want to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and open to public comment. If there's any members of the public who would like to say anything or have any questions, please feel free. Again, we have that 2-minute limit, and then we'll circle back to you if there's no other comments. So feel free to either raise your hand or speak out directly. Okay, hearing no comments.
I'm John McCormick. Somehow the mute and unmute doesn't work with me. May I shift to another subject? And
right now, the
it's
subject
marvelous
that we're
discussion,
talking
but
about,
I'll try to be brief. Okay, all right.
Sorry, John. Right now, the discussion that we're talking about is the households that are unable to access the clean heat measure. So if it's not about that, I would ask you to hold your comment.
All right, I appreciate that, and I'll bring this up at another time. Again, I just want to keep reminding you all that regardless of how you're going to try to treat the LIHEAP recipient or persons who are energy burdened, each 3 years there's going to possibly be an increase in the cost of the credit. And if you can all agree on that, then this is where the rubber meets the road, that these families who already are energy burdened are going to be increasingly energy burdened, but don't have the ability to do their CHS infrastructure retrofit. So you're really going to have to eventually ask your question, is it equitable to charge these families a higher cost of their heating bill, even though they have maybe done some reduction in the demand for oil? That increase could be, according to the Energy Futures Group, as high as $1.41 a gallon. I mean, you really don't have an idea how high a person's energy bill is going to be, though they cannot retrofit. And I'm talking about myself. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so we'll go ahead and throw it back to the members of the EAG. Are there any direct reflections to John's comment? Go ahead, Mia. And I see, Chris, you had your hand up as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think in response to John's comment, this is something that we do need to grapple with, and I think we need to have as much data as possible and as informed discussion as possible. I do think part of that discussion needs to be, you know, if the clean heat standard doesn't pass, what happens? There are costs on the other side of the balance. Eventually, our whole world is going through an energy transition. It's just a matter of timing. And I do think we need to holistically consider the benefits and the costs, both of which are potentially really significant. And I think we need to take that seriously and evaluate this as globally as we can. I think that's important in what we've been asked to do ultimately from the legislature.
Thanks, Mia. Chris.
Do we expect to have some kind of estimate of cost or impact to fuel costs before we wrap up our work plan? I haven't heard that.
The department's potential study will be projecting that, and that is due September 1st. So
it's like some of this is like it's hard to say like, hey, you know, this is really going to impact these households if we don't really know what the number is going to be. Like, are we talking 50 cents? Like, what are we talking about? Just it's difficult to do our work without even a t-shirt size of what that cost impact would be. It's been the most frustrating experience throughout this whole thing. It's just not knowing, but all right. Thanks.
Any other? I thought I heard somebody beginning to speak, but any other thoughts? Okay, so it looks like, and I think the biggest thing that I would have asked as well is, it looks like we need a lot more data and some just like hard touch points. And so thank you, Mia, for volunteering to bring some of that. If anyone else would also like to bring in some data, please feel free to send it in and kind of, instead of just sending a whole report, like really just highlighting the things that are relevant for the specific section and for the EAG to consider with recommendations, please feel free to send them over, and then we can have a little bit more of a robust discussion. This one is actually not one of the ones that we are going to, so the structure that I talked about before, where we have the questions and then in the next meeting we have a bigger discussion about it. This one, we're actually not following that structure because it does tie into so many of the other discussions that we'll talk about, but we can always refer back to the data that we find and incorporate it. So I don't feel like any of this information will be lost. I'll give you one last chance if there's anything else that you want to talk about. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move forward into next steps. Alrighty. Okay, so moving us forward, our next step, so I'll be reaching out to the public engagement group to schedule a meeting, as well as rescheduling with the credit issues group. You should see an email about that by the end of the day today. And we are asking that all of the EAG members identify experts that you might want to bring in for the different sections, and reach out to Mia, Chris, and myself if there's anybody that you'd like to bring in so we can start coordinating with them. Mia will send any data that's already readily known on houses that will be most difficult to access the clean heat standard. And then we have this question that we should explore in further meetings about the temporal effect. So how will the clean heat standard affect future generations, the urgency, the funding that we're starting with, but what will that look like over the years? Are there any next steps that I'm missing? Okay, so I'll hand it over to Mia.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we're in the sort of strange position of being done early, which I think I'm gonna just check in with you, Ashira. We can always close early, or if I guess there's sort of miscellaneous issues that we want to bring up, this is a good time. I can open the floor for anything that people think is a good use of our time. Yeah, Jeff.
Sorry, I've been trying to think in my head how to phrase this question or concern in general about all this. And that's, our weatherization program, we estimate we save on average 30% of the client's fuel usage, not fuel costs, fuel usage, obviously. And that doesn't make the home ready for heat pumps to fully heat that home. I know we're trying to transition fully off of carbon-based fuels at some point. We're not getting that family to that level of housing. That still, a lot of the homes, a heat pump isn't going to fully heat that home. So they're going to still have to use propane or oil. And I'm thinking about the moderate income homes over the income guidelines. I don't think there's enough talk being done on how it's gonna be a really expensive project to get any home to the level where heat pumps can fully heat it, let alone address any issues before you can weatherize it, like we've already just talked about. I mean, you could be looking at $100,000 on some homes to get it to the point, and that's before you cost the cost of heat pumps to fully throw that oil furnace away and never have to use it again. I think we're really underestimating the technical side and what needs to be done in the cost of it to make this clean heat standard work for the person living in the home and to be able to afford to heat their home in the end, let alone afford the payments to pay for the measures, which are going to be significant to get to that point. Sorry to lay this all on you, but I just haven't heard any. I just think it's a huge question mark out there in underestimation of what it's going to take to make this work. So thanks for, I just needed to get it off my chest, and sorry if it didn't make sense, but it's, the more I think of this, it's just really concerning.
Chef, yeah, Jen.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that's a really good point. And I think part of having these kind of really complex discussions and setting up this whole study is all towards that point, that it's going to be hard, it's going to be expensive, but it has to be done. It's not a change that's coming about because people necessarily want to get off fossil fuel, but it's just for our world, we need to do it. So I'm so happy that we're having these robust discussions. And whenever I go to public forums, whether it's Department of Public Service, the climate plan, I'm hearing so many conversations about how this will affect low income, moderate income, how will it affect old housing stock, how will it affect manufactured homes, because I think it will be incremental. It's a big lift to get to that point, but that's the future goal. So I think if we're willing to take it in incremental steps and do everything we can to go towards that goal and envision eventually a time without fossil fuel, it's better than thinking that we're going to do it all in one fell swoop. And that we're willing to have the complex conversations, and we're willing to have discussions that everybody might not agree on. And we're willing to hear from people that are going through the stress and the difficulties to help them get to that eventual point. Because I think the real danger is that certain groups of people are left out of this transition during the time when we're all working towards a transition. So that somewhat, this is now when the funds are coming in, when people are talking about it. So as many people as we can bring on board, make the transition for all the industries, the fuel industry. Everything has to be accounted for in an equitable way, because I think the end game is something that we need to do.
Thank you, Jen. Any other thoughts? Any other, anything else that needs to be brought up in our extra moment? Not, we'll go ahead and close early since we didn't have any updates from the PUC or anything like that.
Great, thanks, Ashira. Yep, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll call this meeting to a close. Thanks for your great work, everybody, today.
Thank
We
you,
had a great
everyone.
discussion.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.